Great. Well, not a whole lot of show for me tonight. We do have a guest speaker. Uh, Her name is Rizel Scarlett. She's a developer advocate at GitHub, which is exciting. She also moonlights as an advisor at the G Code House, if I'm saying that right. That's got some brackets in it in text. That's an organization aimed at teaching women of color and non-binary people of color to code. So we're super excited to have her here tonight to speak with us. And we'll be monitoring the chat, of course, for questions. Otherwise, Rizel, we're turning it over to you.
Cool. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm going to share my screen really quickly so y'all can see it. All right, so we're talking today about a tool called GitHub CoPilot, and this is a talk I often do called Level Up with CoPilot. I like interaction, so definitely feel free to come off of mute or type in the chat or whatever you need to do. Okay, but first interaction question I have for you all is the other day I wrote this tweet with CoPilot. Do you think it's true or false that I actually wrote that tweet with CoPilot? Was I capping? Did I just decide I'm just gonna literally just write a tweet from the web application? So put in the chat if you think it's true or false. Lauren said true. You could totally be like, Rizel's a liar. We got trues. Okay, y'all might be picking up yeah, I was gonna say y'all are picking up on the send tweet with CoPilot context. Cool. All right, so next question to you all is, do you think you can use GitHub Copilot to cultivate your engineering career at any level? True. Okay, cool. Anybody that's not. Cool. So it looks like everyone agrees. I feel like when I first made this talk, people were still suspicious about GitHub Copilot. So there was definitely more skepticism, but I'm glad to see y'all are on the wave. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things, like what is GitHub Copilot, how to use it, how it can level up your career, how it's personally helped me. I also threw in a little bit extra because I knew we had 30 minutes to 1 hour. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting the best results out of GitHub Copilot, and we'll explore if you can actually write tweets with Copilot and how that's even possible. Okay, so really quickly, my name's Rizel. As Eric mentioned, I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. If you see me looking over to the other side, there's a monitor, just so you know. I've been a software engineer for 3 years before being a developer advocate, and I'm an advisor, and I was a director at G Code House, which is a nonprofit organization that introduces women of color and non-binary people of color to code. I'm pretty addicted to social media, so if you did want to connect with me, my handle is at Black Girl Bites on practically literally anything, like Blue Sky, Mastodon, I'm there. Okay. Oh, except for Twitch, I'm Black Girl Bites 1. I forgot my password and just created a whole new account. Okay, so for folks who are not sure what GitHub Copilot is, although from the chat it did seem like people were familiar, it is an AI peer programmer that helps you to write code faster with less work. And sometimes when you're using it, it can feel like it's magic or it's reading your mind. You're like, how did you know? But obviously, y'all are technologists. It is not magic. It doesn't read your mind. And I will always be honest with people. It doesn't always spit out perfectly well-written, up-to-date code. Sometimes it has a sample size or sample data from an older API version, so it leans heavier on that. If you're one of the people that haven't gotten a chance to try it out or see it in action, the experience is very similar to the Smart Compose feature in Gmail or other tools that you've been using. So sometimes when you're writing some text, for example, in this image here, we have someone writing to Jacqueline about Taco Tuesday, and they say, "Hey, Jacqueline, haven't seen you in a while." And then Smart Compose uses predictive text to say, "And I hope you're doing well." And that is the same, very similar experience for GitHub Copilot, except we're using code. Okay, so what's happening? How is it even able to do all of this? Under the hood, GitHub Copilot is drawing context and comments, or from comments in your code and suggesting individual lines and whole functions instantly. When it first came out, it was powered by something called OpenAI Codex. So we're going to kind of go into the different tools that help to make up GitHub Copilot. So for folks who aren't familiar, OpenAI is an AI research lab. They're responsible for, the all popular ChatGPT. They're also responsible for like Dolly, the AI image generation tool, and a whole bunch of other things that you've been using. Codex in particular is a machine learning model that translates natural language into code, and they made that particular one at the time. And the thing with OpenAI Codex is it's actually a version of GPT-3. So if you've heard people saying GPT-3 or GPT-4, that stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and they just number it by like each descendants, right? So GPT-3 is Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3, and Codex is very similar to that. It's a descendant of that. GPT-3 actually uses deep learning to produce human-like text. A lot of applications like Duolingo have used it for grammar correction. And the biggest difference between GPT-3 and Codex is that Codex has been fine-tuned for programming. But in March 2023, GitHub decided they wanted to switch over to Sahara, or it's also known as ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. The reason we switched over to this is because cost-wise, it's cheaper for us. It's less expensive for us. We run Copilot on GPUs, and GPUs are very expensive. They can be hard to find, but also we've noticed that there's less latency with this model, and we also noticed that the response quality is even better. So these are still tools or LLMs built by OpenAI, but this one just has better results for us and happens to just be a little bit more cheaper for us. In addition to that, like, just keep in mind, generative AI is moving really fast. Like, things will change. Maybe in the future we won't be using Sahara, but let's go ahead and check out how an LLM would work. Like, let's have a little activity. I'm gonna go ahead and go to platform.a OpenAI. Hold on, I just gotta drag it over. And I definitely want like y'all to interact in this part as well, because I don't want to feel like I'm talking to myself. All right, so here's one of the cool things about OpenAI. They have like this playground that you can try out different things with them. And I think this just goes to show like how powerful the tooling is. So one of them is a rap battle writer. So we're gonna go ahead and open it up and give me 2 people that you want to do a rap battle between. So this one, the example they have for us is Alan Turing and Claude Shannon, but we can do something more fun than that.
Betty
Britney Spears.
Betty White and Britney Spears. Let's do it.
Yes, that's
Betty White and Britney Spears. Britney Spears. I hope that's how you spell her name. There's so many different versions of Britney's. So let's see. Submitting. All right. This part I always get nervous at because now I have to rap and I'm not a rapper. But all right, let's see what it says. Yo, it's Betty White, the Golden Girl delight. Oh, I'll wait for it to finish. Let's give it a second. Let me see the chat. Awesome choice. I know, right? Oh, y'all are great. Okay, it finished. So Betty White is saying, yo, it's Betty White, the Golden Girl delight. I've been in the spotlight since black and white. While you were in diapers, I was changing the scene. TV icon, yeah, I know, you know what I mean. You're a pop princess known for your dancing. But when it comes to dance talent, I'm the one advancing. I've got Emmys, a star on the Walk of Fame. You've got tabloid covers. Ain't that a shame? And then they got a chorus in here. This is a battle of queens. One a veteran, one in teens, blah, blah, blah. And then Britney says, Britney's here, no need to fear. I've been a pop icon for many a year, from Baby One More Time to Circus Fun. When it comes to music, I've already won. You're a golden girl, but I'm pure gold. I've sold millions of albums, truth be told. You've got laughs, I've got chart-topping tracks. I'm the princess of pop, and that's a fact. Okay, so I just like to show that, just to show like how the knowledge that OpenAI's LLMs have and how powerful they are, because I think sometimes people can get very skeptical about GitHub Copilot. We're going to do another example for fun. Let me see what the chat says. I'm not a rapper, so stop rapping at me. If you know, you know. Better than what's out now. I can't. I love y'all. Y'all are hilarious. All right, we're gonna do one more example, and then I'm gonna show you a code example. So we have the mood to color one. I like the complete. Oh, they changed it. They've changed a lot here since I've shown this. All right, but basically how this works is you give them like a description of a color and it'll generate a CSS text code for you. So we say blue sky at dusk, and it's assuming that the background color is this, and we could type it in Google just to make sure that this is actually the color. And I guess that's what it looks at as a blue sky at dusk. Anyone want to give me like a description of something? I'm gonna do lyrics almost as good as Ice. Hey, don't sleep on my girl Ice Spice. I love Ice Spice. That's my girl. How can I lose when I've already chose? All right, let's say let's say like a golden sunflower or something like that. That should generate something for us. Or even like, let's see if it gives us the color of a basketball. Let's see. It looks like there's stuff in the chat, so maybe y'all have a suggestion. Okay, it's a little bit more brighter than a basketball, in my opinion. Sunset at dawn. Hell yeah. Oh, maybe I don't know if I could say those words, but yay. Let's see. Sunset at dawn.
You replace that with yay.
Yeah, yay. Sorry. Okay. Let's see what it gives us for sunset at dawn. I'm really excited because it could be a lot of colors. Okay, this looks more like a basketball, but like the basketball color that I was expecting. But just so you can see like the amount of knowledge and power that OpenAI's models have and what GitHub Copilot's using. Okay, in another sense, if we're just using actual code or just like prompting it to write actual code, I can say something like write a binary search algorithm in JavaScript. And I've done this multiple times. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that is because generative AI and things like GitHub Copilot are non-deterministic. So we can't control their output. There's different things we can do to help prompt it in the right direction, but it may or may not actually submit it. So, but it seems like it did this time. So what happened is it generated the actual function for a binary search algorithm. It also left little comments in between so we knew what was going on. And then it actually calls the function with a console log, which is amazing. Let me see what the chat says. Melancholy. Oh, wait, I didn't even see that. We can try that another time. But yeah, so that's how y'all see the actual power of GitHub Copilot. Let's go back to the slides now, or what's behind the scenes of GitHub Copilot. Let's pull this up again. Presenter view. All right, we did all of those. Okay, so the various features that are within GitHub Copilot, we have the predictive code feature, where, like I was showing you all, you write a comment, you start maybe writing a function, and GitHub Copilot tries to predict what you're going to write. We also have the ability to view other suggestions. I think a lot of people don't know this. If you get an initial suggestion from GitHub Copilot and you're not really feeling it, you can hover over that text. We call it ghost text. And you'll be able to see a panel similar to this that'll ask you for the next, if you want the next suggestion, the previous suggestion, or if you click open GitHub Copilot, it'll show you all the possible suggestions it was going to give you. This is really helpful, in my opinion. And then we also have other things that we've come out with, like Copilot Labs or Copilot X. Copilot Labs is cool because it could translate like one programming language or a code snippet from one programming language to another. So like we see here, we're able to change this JavaScript code and convert it into Python for us. And that's helpful. Maybe you're working with a new programming language that you're not familiar with, and you're like, okay, I can write it out in the language that I know, and I just want to go ahead and flip it around. CoPilot Labs also can give you an explanation. So can CoPilot Chat, and I'll show you that later. If people are curious what CoPilot Labs is, it's a separate but complementary extension. So it comes complementary with GitHub Copilot. You don't have to pay extra, but it is separate, and it's more of like the experimental extension that we're using to like build out extra things. But yeah, so you can see here, it'll give you an explanation of step by step of what's happening. If we zoom in, we can see that on step 1, it says declare 2 variables, low and high, which will be used to represent the start and end of the search, initialize low to 0, high to the length of array -1, so on and so forth. If you're wondering, where can I use this? You can use it in a ton of different places like Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, JetBrains, IDEs, or NeoVim, even for if we have any NeoVim users here. And here we do. Okay, I see someone. Oh, wait, here's one thing I want to point out. Sometimes people are wondering, is GitHub Copilot like copying code from the internet? Like, is it actively just pulling in code from the internet? The suggestions that you see are basically the model. These are all synthesized by the model and never copied and pasted from a repository. They were like trained previously, and it's not like we're going right in like in real time grabbing code from a repo. And oftentimes there may be moments where your code matches public code. That's more coincidental. And what we've been doing, we've brought in a couple of things to help with that. So one, we have this fail safe or filter that you can set in your GitHub settings, where you can say, okay, I don't want it to match any public code at all. Some people are okay with this, some people aren't. If you don't want it to match public code, you can set it to that. We also have a feature where basically if 150 characters or more do match public code and you don't have that setting blocked, it'll let you know. It'll be like, hold on, we did find this in a different repository that's very like popular. And that way you're able to make a more informed decision. Maybe it's a binary search algorithm. Everybody writes those and you're like, oh, that's not a big deal. But maybe you're working at a company where it's like you have licensing like issues and copyright stuff that you want to be sure to stay away from. Another thing people wonder about is like the code quality. Is GitHub Copilot introducing vulnerabilities? It can, to be honest, right? Like it's trained off of public code. Some public code is bad. And that's why I always tell people, just like you would review the code of a coworker or a friend, review the code that an AI would generate. But we also have put in things in place, like we created an AI security vulnerability tool that tests for common security vulnerabilities within GitHub Copilot, like cross-site scripting, SQL injections, hard-coded credentials. So we're trying to make sure those things don't happen. Now, you might be saying, all right, you just told me like so many things about GitHub Copilot. How is this useful for me? How will this help me level up? Like, this is not a sales pitch, right? So I want to know from y'all, what are some of your goals as a software engineer or technologist? And let me look at the chat. It's so hard to navigate the Zoom thing. Okay, let's see. I like the performance note there. When I try to use it for things I actually need help with, it doesn't actually help. We're going to go over that, Joseph. Don't worry. We're going to go over that. How would you prompt it to assist with non-trivial problems? Yeah, we're definitely going to go over that. Here's how I think about prompt engineering. Okay, cool. We're definitely, that's closer to the end. And I definitely have a lot of things on that, but I do want to talk about what are your goals as a software engineer? So helping, writing clean code, no smell, yep. to become so technically adept I can explain concepts to a 7-year-old. Heck yeah. I mean, sorry, yes. I need help with those next level concepts that I don't grasp easily. Learn new languages. Perfect, right? So those are actually pretty similar to some of my goals as a software engineer, right? I think I heard someone say they want to be able to write really clean code. I want to code really fast and clean. I want that if someone sends me or assigns a task or a ticket or issue to me, I finish it so quickly, and when they look at the code, they're like, dang, this is so clean. Like, I did not know Rizel was a genius. I also want to be able to be a good mentor. I want to be able to write good documentation so that if I were to leave a place or I just wasn't there that day, people will be able to like know what's going on. And I want to be able to gain understanding for new concepts really quickly, because there's all these different programming languages and frameworks and different concepts that I don't know about and that are coming out every day, and I want to be able to grasp all those things. Here's my thing. GitHub Copilot continues to help me do all 4 of those things that I mentioned. And I'm going to talk to you all about how I do that. And then I'm going to talk to you all about like prompting GitHub Copilot. Like I saw a little bit of like questions in there. Okay. In terms of prompting GitHub Copilot, I mean, not prompting, but coding faster and cleaner. All right. First off, GitHub Copilot is excellent at recognizing patterns. Like that's what it does best. It's good for like either you're using an API or you're creating an API or you're writing unit tests. It'll pick up on like maybe you wrote a GET request. It'll pick up on how you should format the POST request and so on and so forth. It's also really great for things like regex. I don't know about y'all, but I think regex is super powerful, but I'm not going to remember all of those digits or symbols and all of that. And sometimes it takes me 30 minutes to an hour just to write one line of regex because I'm like searching on Stack Overflow. I'm in regex playgrounds trying to figure it out. With GitHub Copilot, that is sped up by a million. And then it also helps me to write more clean code in terms of like leaving comments. I know that's a little bit more controversial. Some people think don't put comments in your code. Some people say put comments in your code. But I believe putting comments in your code does make your application really readable for other people. And to me, if you're writing comments to prompt an AI, imagine, and an AI can understand it, imagine how clear it would be for your friend or your coworker. All right, so I'm going to talk about my personal experience. For me, I feel like I write really messy code and I often have to go back and refactor it. Like my brain is just like all over the place sometimes. And so when I joined GitHub back in like 2021, my team was like, oh, you're going to work with the Microsoft VS Code team to create an extension. And I was not really excited for that. I was not thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh, now they're going to see, like, imposter syndrome was hitting. I was like, they're going to see how bad I code. It's going to be messy. And I never wrote a VS Code extension before, but I ended up doing it. I finished it really quickly. I leaned on GitHub Copilot to kind of navigate the API. And to my surprise, I received the email from a principal developer advocate at Microsoft saying, the code is gorgeous, so easy to read and well commented. And I was like, what? No one has ever said that to me before. My code is messy sometimes, and that's okay. But I think partially I could have been a little bit not trusting in my own abilities, but also GitHub Copilot did help me to write really clean code, and just the practice of writing out those comments helped me to start thinking about what am I going to do, how am I going to handle this before starting to just jump in and write code. Here are a couple of examples of GitHub Copilot being really great at things like patterns and syntax. So here we have my friend Mike Dev using GitHub Copilot to translate the words answer, question, and date into different languages. All Mike Dev does is provide the language code, like JP for Japanese, FR for French, ES for Spanish, and GitHub Copilot is able to follow that format of putting them in an array and translating each language and having the comma and all of that in there. Here's an example of using it with regex. Basically, I write a comment here that says validate a phone number. And it takes me, I don't even know how long this is, but I feel like it's less than 30 seconds to write out the regex for this. Whereas I might have been like, how do you do this? And might have taken a little bit more time to research. All I did was maybe type a little bit of letters like FUN for function, and maybe I just have to go back and change the var to like const or let, but it really sped up the process for me. And here's my favorite example about GitHub Copilot. I think it's great if you speak English as a second language. Code is very American English centric. So like even the word color in CSS, right? People who are born in like the UK or Canada, they spell color with a U, and they might not even notice when they have a typo in their code. I also think of like how difficult it must be. Like sometimes I can't remember how to spell things in code, how difficult it must be if you don't natively speak English. And if some of these words, when you're trying to learn to code, don't really have meaning to you. What I ended up trying out was I wrote some comments in Spanish, and it literally printed out all the code that I needed. So I essentially say, write a rock, paper, scissors game for me, import the random module, and it does all of the rest of the logic. And I couldn't believe that it could work. So I ended up running the program, and it did. Like it says enter 1 for rock, 2 for paper, 3 for scissors, and then I end up like tying. Oh, let me check the chat. There's 7 messages in here. Okay. Dude, I asked ChatGPT explain things to me like I'm 10 years old. Learn new languages. Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Is Xcode support ever going to be a thing? Definite Apple decision there. Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. Thinking about Copilot for documentation. All right. So documentation is, to me, vital, but it can be really tedious. So oftentimes people end up skipping it. But it really helps to have that tribal knowledge written down. While GitHub Copilot, I would not suggest it for writing out like prose, writing blog posts, literally writing out documentation one by one. Like GitHub Copilot is not great with that. However, it's good if you want to add in some code snippets. We have my friend Hayden Barnes here. He uses GitHub Copilot to basically talk about, or to write out some documentation about installing basic building requirements. First, he has how to use it on Ubuntu, and then how to use it on SUSE, and it literally writes out the command for him: sudo zipper install gcc, etc. And his mind is blown by this. We also have a friend of mine who works at Microsoft who admits that half of the static web app CLI documentation was written using GitHub Copilot, which is pretty amazing. Another thing I want to talk about is being a better mentor and mentee. For me, that is a goal for me. As a mentee, I think, and even when, especially when I'm peer programming, I am a very anxious person. So I tend to, when I'm pair programming, I stop remembering anything about the logic. In my head, all I'm like is like, oh my gosh, they noticed when I spelt that wrong, or oh my gosh, like I forgot to put the colon, they're judging me, and I end up being like, to me, a really annoying pair programmer. But while I'm using GitHub Copilot and pair programming with somebody else, it removes that like hyper focus on syntax for me, and I get to focus on the logic, and I think we have more productive sessions. On the flip side, as being a mentor, I've taught people how to code and like mostly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and other frameworks with JavaScript. But sometimes people come back to me, they get a job, and they're like, I need help with C#. I'm like, I do not know C#. I don't know who you think I am, but I don't know C#. But things that have been helpful for me in actually assisting them is using GitHub Copilot, whether I use GitHub Copilot Chat or Copilot Labs to actually translate what they're working on into a language I can understand. And then I'm able to be like, okay, here's what you're like trying to do, and here's how I would take the direction. And then in terms of learning new concepts or new framework, one way I found this helpful, and people may argue with me, but is in studying for interviews. Sometimes I'm like practicing LeetCode, and then all of a sudden I'm on a LeetCode hard, and I'm like, this is boring. And all of a sudden I'm watching Netflix or I'm taking a nap. I feel like leveraging GitHub Copilot kind of helps to keep my momentum. Sometimes I'll use GitHub Copilot to actually solve the problem. I'll use it to explain it to me, like how it solved the problem. I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Then I'll delete all the code and I will go back and try to solve it myself. I won't copy the exact way it did it, but it helps me to be like, here's how I should have approached the problem instead of being stuck. Navigating a new code base, using the Copilot Labs explain feature or Copilot chat. When you come across a snippet of code that you're like, this makes no sense, maybe I should delete it. Why is this in this open source project or at my new company? It really helps with that, just understanding why they wrote that logic there. And then also for me as a developer advocate, oftentimes I have to create demos or I have to write about how to do something with a particular technology or language that I'm not familiar with. GitHub Copilot speeds that up for me by so much. I'll give you an example. When maybe in early 2022, when the Twitter team was still together, the Twitter DevRel team had asked us to like demonstrate using GitHub Copilot with the Twitter API. But they wanted me to use Python for it. And although Python is a readable and relatively easy, quote unquote, language, I'm not familiar with Python. I only know JavaScript. So I was like really nervous, but I ended up like creating the demo 30 minutes before. And here's me just like celebrating and being like, wow, I can't believe GitHub Copilot helped me out. Like basically I said, I don't know how to write Python. And then I don't know if y'all remember this meme in the summer where Usher goes, watch this. But like that was just me being really excited about that. So we're just going to see a little video of this working because I have cooler demos now to show. But we're going to see a video of me using Copilot to write a tweet. Oh, there's a lot in the chat, but I'll check it after. So at the top, you can see me writing a comment that says, write the Tweepy library. And I end up just accepting the suggestion. Then it suggests to import the config.py file where all my environment variables live. I didn't even write that comment. It suggests that for me. Next line, I accept that. Next, now it's like the next thing you need to do, like I'm not even typing the prompts for it. It says the next thing you need to do is create a client with tweepy.client that takes the consumer key, consumer secret, and access token as arguments. I'm just tabbing as it like suggests stuff for me. The only thing I needed to do was essentially like format it because it was looking crazy. So I think if we just okay, I'll let it do its thing. But I essentially format what it's giving me here. And then on the next line, I think that it's going to suggest that I put the variable with the text of the tweet in there. I'm like, sure, go right ahead. And I think I decide I want to give it some more information, some more context. So I wanted to say I believe this is at GitHub Universe 2022. And I wrote this tweet with Copilot. And I wish I could just fast forward this, but every time I do that, it starts over. So we're going to watch it. And then it writes out that variable for me with that text. And then the next thing it suggests is sending the tweet. And I'm like, sure, we send it. And next thing I want to do is just print the response. It's literally so easy. This might have taken me like a smidge longer to do. And when I go ahead and run it, we'll see, not live, obviously, because we're watching a recording. We'll see that I actually wrote this tweet out. And I've done this multiple times. So I wanted to save Twitter from seeing me write, I wrote this tweet with Copilot a million times. So we go to my profile and we'll see that it says 8 seconds ago, I wrote, I am at GitHub Universe 2022, and I sent this tweet with Copilot. All right. So we did see that, let's go to the next one. We did see that Copilot, I hope y'all saw that you could send tweets to Copilot. It can help you level up your career, but let's see a couple of more things. So I'm going to do a live demo right now. And for some reason, it's not open. That's all right. we'll go to github.com/codespaces. I guess y'all will get to learn about something extra. I don't know how many of you have used Codespaces before, but it's essentially like an in-browser IDE for you. The cool thing is we have a couple of templates for people. So if you're not familiar or you want to learn like Jupyter Notebook or Django or Preact or Next.js, you can literally open this up and it has like boilerplate code for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the Next.js template, and what we're going to do is create a markdown editor, and we'll interact with CoPilot chat as well, which is an additional like CoPilot feature. Let's see the chat while it's all loading up. What's tweeps? Sorry. That's a good question. It's Tweepy. That is a Python package that helps you to interact with the Twitter API. That was the thing I didn't know how to use, and CoPilot helped me. Cool. Watch this meme. Question: will you increase the tiny font size? Oh, yes. Is this good? Thank you for telling me that, Sherry. What? Anyone else create code? Anyone else who already codes fast creates clean code now without CoPilot? That's fastest subjective for me. Okay, cool. And I just want to pull up one more thing. I had this open earlier, but it went away. Let me know if I go over time, but I don't think I am over time yet.
No, you're good.
Cool. Perfect. Here we go. All right. So as we can see, the code space already has some code in it. It could work. Like you can do things with it. So if y'all wanted to try out a code space, you can. But we don't need this code here. We just needed the packages and dependencies that are already installed. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a markdown editor. And I'm going to do this by prompting GitHub Copilot with a really large comment here. So this comment, if I can zoom in even more for y'all, is saying, I want to create a basic markdown editor in Next.js with the following features. I tell it I want to use React hooks. I want to create a state for the markdown with default text, type markdown here. I want the text area, I want there to be a text area where users can write markdown. I want to show a live preview. I wanted to do basic things like just have like basic features like headers, bold, italics. I wanted to use the React markdown NPM package, etc., etc. So fingers crossed that this works. Remember that GitHub Copilot's output is non-deterministic, so I can't always control it, but writing a large comment with all the details is kind of my trick for trying to make sure it does what I want it to do. So it imported the React package, like I said, and the React Markdown package, and then it's going to try to create that component for me. Literally, this is exactly what I need, and I'll just export it. And there's just one more thing I need to do. I think it's install these packages. So I'm going to install React Markdown. And then ahead of time, I'm going to install styled components because we're going to use that after at latest. All right, so it should be able to compile now. This is our markdown editor. It's ugly, but it works, right? It gave us like H2. We can do bullets. We can do, what is this? Bold or italics? Bold. We can do italics. So it is doing what I prompted it to do. Maybe it could even do a URL. This is a URL. Oop. Is it this way? No, it's the other way. And we can say like google.com. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, there it is. It did it. So we have this like basic looking markdown editor, but what if we can make it look a little bit prettier? So I'm going to go ahead and open up CoPilot chat. And if you've heard people talking about, sorry, I'm going to make it small for a second. If you've heard people talking about CoPilot X ever, that is just a marketing term for a suite of tools that we're coming out with. So we're coming out with CoPilot Chat, which is basically Chat GPT, but inside of your editor, like inside of VS Code. We're coming out with CoPilot for CLI, which it basically helps you to navigate the terminal. So you can write in a command inside of your terminal and tell if you forgot a command and you're like, hey, I want to be able to find this file, or I want to be able to like create a folder, something simple or something complex, whatever it is. And CoPilot will essentially generate that command for you. You get to revise the query just before actually pressing enter, so you don't delete anything. But we have so many cool things that are coming out just to help improve your developer productivity and workflow. So we're going to ask CoPilot Chat if it could help me to make my markdown editor look a little bit more pretty. So I'm going to say, I'm going to zoom in for y'all and say, please propose the code to make my markdown editor have a more modern UX design. And then I want it to specifically use styled components. So I'm going to say, please use styled components. Fingers crossed that it does what I needed to do. All right, here we go. It imports the styled components package, and it has some CSS styles. Let's see what it's interpreting as more modern. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert that by pressing this little button here, and we can see that the code has, or the preview has actually changed. It gives us what it thinks is more modern. Maybe not for me. I don't really think this is modern, but it gives us like this little live preview window. It gave us like a little bit of like box shadowing and stuff like that. So I think that's really cool. Let me just check the chat really quickly. 2 new messages. Question, will you share the index.js or do we need to follow along? You don't need to follow along. This is just a demo just so you can see the power of GitHub Copilot. I may have a repository with this code in it that I can show you. What VS Code color are you using? It looks pretty. Oh, theme? I believe I'm using Panda. Theme. Yeah, I think I'm using Panda. Yeah, baby Panda. Okay, so we're almost done. Now I will tell y'all some tips and tricks for making GitHub Copilot do what you want it to do. And not sure why these files keep closing, these browser windows. Let me scroll this over to you. So we have that. And you might be saying, yeah, when I use GitHub Copilot, I am not getting these like perfect results. It's not really putting out what I want. I saw in the chat someone was mentioning prompt engineering. If you're not familiar with that practice, it's basically the practice of using prompts to get the output that you want. In our case, comments are our prompts, or in the case of Copilot Chat, whatever you're typing or questioning Copilot Chat, that's your prompt. And here are some of like a few tips I have. I actually have a blog post that I could share with y'all that has a little bit more detail, but put a high-level task description at the top of your file. This is important, especially if there's nothing in your code base at all. Like if your VS Code Studio is just an index.js, it doesn't know what it doesn't know what you want it to do. So I try to put like the entire, like the essential purpose of the app. Like maybe I'll say something as simple as this is going to be a rock, paper, scissors game, or I can get a little bit more detailed and say, hey, I'm making a markdown editor and I want it to have these particular features. If it has code inside of the actual program, you might have a better experience, but if there's nothing in it, you want to give it some context because it has no context. Also, providing examples. I'll show y'all a screenshot. I'll show y'all that in a second, but basically you want to provide a few examples to GitHub Copilot, because AI and machine learning models use this concept of like one-shot learning, few-shot learning, zero-shot learning. With the more examples that you give it, the more refined the results it'll output for you, and then iterate a little bit more for specificity. If you don't get the results you want, at first, go back and make your comment be even more specific. There's a couple other things I want to mention, like making sure you have consistent naming conventions. If you use camel case, keep using camel case. Don't switch between snake case, camel case, everything case. It'll get confused. Make sure your variables are and your function names are descriptive, because if it has that context of, oh, this is the function that's going to get the user IDs, it'll know where to go. Another thing that is really helpful is keeping a tab of 1 to 2 relevant files open. Don't keep too many files open, because that can mess with the results. But the reason I say that is, let's say you have a file that has where you define the function or you define the variable, and you want to be able to refer to that in another file. Keep that neighboring tab open. And if you're like not familiar with tabs and you just started to code, let me see if I can show you all what I mean. So sorry, all these monitors. But so basically, like here, these are neighboring tabs for each file. So if I like created a function in here, I can refer to it over here as well. So let's see. Hopefully this works. But let's say I say function get API data and then return data, something like that. Right? And then let's say I have a suggestion here. I can say use get API data. Okay, it did not, it's not doing what I wanted it to do. But again, oh, there we go. So it kind of gets the idea that you might want to use it this way. Oftentimes that helps me the most. Again, GitHub Copilot's non-deterministic, so sometimes during demos it doesn't always do what I want it to do. We'll go back to the slide. We are almost done. Almost done. And then of course use good coding practices. You always should. Just because you're using an AI tool doesn't mean that you don't use good coding practices. This is the end of my slide deck. I will definitely share this with you all. Let me put this in the chat. And then another thing I wanted to share with you all is the prompt engineering tips. I'll drag this over so you could see. And y'all can ask questions or come off of mute in a second. I know I went on for a little bit, but here's like an example of what I meant when I was saying get specific. So for example, here I wrote get data from API. All GitHub Copilot generated for me was code goes here. And I was like, that's not what I wanted. But once I got more specific and I said pass in user IDs and retrieve user data from this particular API and return it as a JSON object, it did all of that for me. Another example is here at the top. I told it like I want to draw like a house, a white house with a red door, etc., etc. At the top of the file, I actually have a comment describing how I wanted it to look. So I'm going to drop this in the chat, and I'm going to drop the actual slides in the chat too. So CoPilot only works off of open buffers file, not the full code base. Yes, at the moment, it doesn't work off of the full code base. They're working on making that happen. They know how to do it, but at the same time, they said that it reduces like the relevant suggestions for it. So they're trying to find that balance between making sure those suggestions are still relevant. But I think they're getting pretty close. It's not too far away. View only link, copy, paste. Let me see what other. That's the slide deck. Baby panda. Okay, cool. That is all of my presentation for you all. Thank you for listening. I would love to like chat with you all if there's any time to just have any last minute thoughts.
All right. And folks, feel free to come off mute, ask a question. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the question does not have to be limited to CoPilot. Although, you know, I think that's probably certainly welcome.
I see a question that says, how did you get into being a developer advocate? That's a good question. I was a software engineer, and I like coding, but I'm not really the type of person that is interested in coding long term on one project. Like I get bored, to be honest. So when I started running G Code, which is the nonprofit coding boot camp, and I started creating like content for them and the curriculum, I realized I love doing that. And I was like, I wish this existed, but with the money I get as a software engineer, it turns out it did. I just applied to a whole bunch of developer advocate jobs until someone took me. I see Joseph's hand.
What you got, Joseph?
Are there any demos for things that are like outside of the web development niche? Every time I see demos for these AI tools, it's always focused around web development. I work mostly in systems programming, and I do a lot of like high compute stuff, Unreal Engine stuff. I've seen that it's like somewhat useful for Unity. People in my studio have tried to use it for Unreal Engine. They haven't been able to get it to do anything beyond like super trivial stuff. And a lot of times use like the wrong version of API for stuff.
Yeah, it does use the wrong versions of API for things. I skipped my demo that would have been a little bit more complex, but I'm gonna have to ask someone on my team for demos of system programming stuff, because I low-key made a lot of the demos for GitHub Copilot, and I only do web development, so that might be why you only see those ones.
Well, and I would imagine too, right? Like it depends on what publicly available code there is. How much
that's true. That's true. That is a really good point, Eric. Yeah. It works with a lot of different programming languages, but if the data it was trained on wasn't really trained on, or there's not that much public code on the stuff you're dealing with, that's part of why. Yeah, it is $10 a month. If your team buys it, it is $20 a month, but like you can have your company buy it and then you get access. Yeah, Lawrence, what's up?
Hey, that was pretty awesome. Thanks for coming out tonight. I have a question. You mentioned being tasked with making a demo for a company in a language you weren't familiar with, and CoPilot helped you along the way. I would love for you just to briefly kind of talk through how that worked for you, because it might be highly relevant for me in my role I started last week. So I'm all ears. I'm all ears.
I feel like, let me see what my process is. And I can show you, I can send you how I used Copilot to learn different programming languages, but I kind of just jumped in. I wrote wrote those comments that you see me writing of what I want to get done. I had the documentation open at the side, but it was kind of like assisting me along the way with like certain methods that I didn't know existed or APIs I didn't know existed within that. I don't really have my thoughts together for this, but I kind of just coded and then seen what GitHub Copilot would suggest to me just to speed me up. Yeah.
Cool. Maybe I'll be a future blog article.
Yeah, I think so. I need to think about how I would talk about that.
You're probably so good at it by now, you're unconsciously competent. Like you don't even think, you're just it's just like it's like your third hand at this point, I'm sure.
A little bit. It's just doing things and I'm like, accept. Someone says I use tab 9 now. This is making me want to switch. Really? I'm curious. I've not used tab 9, Code Whisperer, all the other stuff. I'm curious to try them out though. And congrats, Lawrence, on becoming a developer advocate. Someone said, what's the engineering and what's the ladder look like? It's very similar to software engineering. You got junior, mid-level, senior, staff, principal, director. And then someone said, what does the developer advocate do? Lawrence, do you want to answer that since you're on now? Or no?
Orientation.
I'm sorry, I was off the wrong screen. What do we do?
Yeah.
Oh man, a lot. It really varies by company. I'll give the short answer. You represent the company to the developer community, and you represent the developer community back to your company. So you're highly responsive when it comes to communication. Obviously, you want to position your company's products and services to developers, help them win. But sometimes our products have issues. They're crap. They have bugs. Things don't work. So you take that feedback back to the company. That's the big part. And then that happens in a variety of ways, from videos and blogs and meetups and conferences and lots of other ways.
Yep. That was pretty good. I'm gonna drop 2 blog posts on how I became one and what we do and stuff like that. But can I be a developer advocate if I don't like people? we gotta be.
How well can you fake it? How well can you fake it?
The hardest part for me is all the conferences. I feel like it's draining and I'm very introverted, but I like people, so I don't know. You can read the blog post and see if you will like being a developer advocate. Tab 9 is a lifesaver when it comes to everyday coding, but I'll check CoPilot as well. Nice. Yeah, one thing for me why I probably prefer CoPilot more is because, one, I work there, but also because like they have other things that are coming out, like the chat, the CoPilot chat, and like CoPilot for CLI, like it's extending beyond other things. What did you do to learn? Self-taught or boot camp? I went to a coding boot camp to learn to code. Then I got a job. Then I felt imposter syndrome, so I went to college while I had a job, and for my computer science degree. And then the DevRel part, I just learned it from life, I guess. That's all I have, though, y'all. It was really nice talking to everyone.
This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Yes,
coming.
thank you.
with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, everyone. Have a great evening.